Hey, this is Lee Green, and I'm the host of the Stairway to CEO podcast, a new show that brings you interviews with the brightest founders and business leaders from all over the world. Stairway to CEO just joined the Future Commerce family, and if you like podcasts like How I Built This, Masters of Scale, or The School of Greatness, then I think you're going to love it. The show comes out every Tuesday, and you can get it on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe to Stairway to CEO today at futurecommerce.fm/Stairway to CEO. That's futurecommerce.fm/Stairway to CEO.
Future Commerce is brought to you by Vertex. Vertex Cloud is for businesses of all sizes, from small and medium-sized businesses all the way to enterprise. You can find out how Vertex can help your business by visiting them online at vertexcloud.com/futurecommerce. Future Commerce is brought to you by OmniSend. OmniSend is way more than just email marketing. Drive more sales and combine more channels with one platform. Learn more about OmniSend today at omnisend.com/futurecommerce. Future Commerce is brought to you by Gladly. What if customer service could feel like a conversation between friends? Well, Gladly is a radically personal customer service platform that puts people, yes, people, at the center of a single lifelong conversation. By enabling B2C companies to focus on people talking to people, Gladly powers a lifetime of conversations across every channel, from phone, email, text, chat, and social media. See what a truly customer-centered platform looks like today at gladly.com/futurecommerce. Hello and welcome to Future Commerce, the podcast about cutting edge and next generation commerce. I'm Philip. Today, Future Commerce is going to flashback commerce. Wait, don't press the stop button. Don't skip this one yet. When I say flashback, we're flashing back to BC, before COVID. This interview with Jackson Jeyanayagam, who heads up direct-to-consumer at Clorox. This interview was recorded in February of 2020 when the world was very, very different. But you know what's really interesting is that Clorox's direct-to-consumer strategy is more focused now than it's ever been. And Jackson dives into a little bit about how he thinks about bringing direct-to-consumer to a big consumer packaged goods company and how he's launching a new brand called Objective and how that new brand is going to aim towards an underserved generation segment in the marketplace and how all of his experience at Chipotle and at Boxed as the CMO there at Boxed, how his experience has informed him to approach this and answer a bunch of questions like the build versus buy conversation and how a company like this differentiates itself as a modern brand in the marketplace and by launching new brands and acquiring loved brands that already exist. It's a fabulous interview. You're going to get a lot out of it. I don't care that if this was recorded in 2020 or 2019 or 2018, this will be useful to you in this moment. You're going to want to dive in, get something cold to drink, sit back, relax, settle in, because we're going to talk to Jackson Jeyanayagam, who heads up direct-to-consumer at Clorox. Today, we are joined by Jackson Jeyanayagam, who is, I think, newly minted as a VP and GM over at Clorox. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Is it so new, or am I behind the times?
Well, this is kind of like that question of like Happy New Year. Like, when can you keep saying Happy New Year? Same deal. So I've been in the role for about a year and a month. So am I allowed?
Oh, okay.
Are we allowed to say I'm new? I feel like I am, because Clorox has a lot of folks who've been there for 15, 20 years. I feel like it's still pretty new, but I don't know, maybe a year is that threshold. You tell me.
Yeah. I'd say you're in the club now.
Okay.
You know, once you go over, you're 13 months in, you're not newly minted. You're in the club.
Yeah, I'm minted. Okay. Well, then I'm minted at Clorox as of last January.
Are you vested, I think, is the question that everyone should be asking.
2 more years, I think, on that.
Okay. Nice. All right. Well, we got it. So yeah. We'll make sure to follow up and we'll send you an email of congratulations that time. For those who don't know you, I'm really excited to talk about some of the direction of Clorox today, especially in DTC and some of the stuff you guys have done on the acquisition side. But you know, you're an interesting person. You've had a really interesting career path. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Really appreciate that. I don't know if my wife or my friends would agree I'm that interesting, but I appreciate you saying it. Yeah, where do you want me to start from? Just kind of where my career has taken me to my current role?
I think in the pre-show you were saying, Chipotle boxed and
Mhm.
Clorox, one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I'm not like a lot of my peers and friends who I respect tremendously, who, had a very clear vision to their career and path, did undergrad, had way better grades than I did, went to grad school, or maybe worked and then went to grad school. Maybe they worked at a consultancy agency and then worked at a big CPG or a big,
Yep.
a large Fortune 100 company and then ended up a startup. Or my friends who are entrepreneurs, from scratch, always starting companies. Maybe they were VC, maybe they were, both an operator and an investor and have launched 2 or 3 companies. I'm just like kind of this guy who barely had a 3-point GPA. In my first 2 years was like under a 2-point GPA. So I just struggled to get to like a 2.9. And undergrad, didn't go to a big name school, University of Oregon, a great football team, and that's about it. And love the program, love the school, but it's no Harvard, obviously. And then I didn't go to grad school, never wanted to. I was a crappy student. I hate homework. I didn't know what I wanted to do my senior year in college, which is like 2000. I graduated in June 2000. And so, I had a friend who said, "Hey, you should do PR." I'm like, "Well, what's PR?" He's like, "Well, it's you throw parties and talk to celebrities and you like parties." I'm like, "Great, I'll do that. That sounds awesome."
Sign me up.
I mean, that's all it took. I knew I didn't want to go into science. My dad's engineer. I didn't want to do that. Like a typical Brown family. My dad and my mom, "You should be a doctor, engineer." I'm like, I have no interest in that. I knew I wanted to be in the liberal arts side of the field, but didn't know anything beyond that. Love sociology, but didn't want to be a social worker. So yeah, I fell into PR, did an internship. I'm like, that seems cool. I joined a PR agency, and I'm telling you guys, my first 6 years, I didn't throw one party. I made a lot of phone calls. I did a lot of notes. This is pre-social media for the most part, and I was faxing journalists and pitching. And I'm like, I mean, it's a job, I think I made like $23,000 a year out of college in Portland. So it was fine. I paid the bills. I wasn't rich by any means, struggling eating Cheerios for dinner, and didn't know what I wanted to do. I moved to Seattle with the agency.
Seattle.
Seattle. Yep. Seattle called my name.
Sorry.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
I was very excited. I was like, wow, he really likes Seattle. So
I really do. I really do.
it's a cool city. I love Portland, but Seattle's pretty cool too. So I moved up there to work on T-Mobile, again, on the agency side. And then that's kind of when my whole world opened up. I had a great boss. He's still kind of a good friend and mentor to me who, he'd traveled all over the world. It's like, listen, you're going to travel probably more and move more for your job than you realize right now. And this is your first step. And, you got to take a risk sometimes. And that was a big lesson that took me with me for my whole career. And I got lucky enough to work on all the side. You remember the sidekicks, T-Mobile sidekicks back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
And Paris Hilton got me into those way back in the day.
So we worked with her. We launched every sidekick. That was my baby. And most people don't know, like that thing punched above its weight, meaning that wasn't like 100-person marketing team with a $20 million budget. It was like 5 of us, a couple people from 2 different agencies and 2 people internally. I mean, it was a tiny piece of business compared to the core business was like flip phones and Blackberries and stuff.
Right.
That's the majority of our focus was like making this thing cool and hip without spending a lot of money, no TV really, and making it popular and hot through this kind of underground method of PR, content, influencers, celebrities. And that's what we did. So, Paris Hilton, then her sidekick got hacked and it became a huge issue that we were dealing with on social media. And I was one of the few that understood social media in 2005. I was doing stuff from MySpace, doing stuff for the bloggers, like working with the founders of like Engadget and Crunch Gear and Gizmodo. I know those guys like really well from way back in the day. But these were like at the time, no one was thinking about MySpace and Gizmodo. Everyone was thinking about Wall Street Journal and Good Morning America. And I was the one guy that knew how to handle this. And it was all happening online over the weekend when our phone got hacked. And long story short, we kind of came up with a plan and addressed it and minimized all the issues of customer service and people going into the stores to cancel their phone. Because in 2005, no one knew your smartphone or your phone could get hacked. And Sidekick was a smartphone, right? So we handled it. And then the clients were like, hey, we should do more on social media. Can you take on more? And we'll give you some budget for that. So that's when it really opened my eyes to digital marketing and social media. For the next 5 years or 4 years, I spent with T-Mobile in Seattle, then moved to New York, launching all their sidekicks, expanding into social. I launched them on Wikipedia, launched them on Twitter, then handed over to customer care. But at the time, this seems like a big deal now, right? But at the time, Wikipedia wasn't that big of a deal. Twitter wasn't that big of a deal. We were just doing what was out there. Like, let's try this thing. Facebook became public to people beyond college. Let's try something on Facebook. So we did a lot of wrong things. I created fake personas on MySpace and tried to befriend people who look like our demo. I mean, things that you would never do nowadays because there was no rules, right? No one knew.
Right.
was like a 27-year-old kid with a budget and a cool sidekick product. So what else am I going to do, right? I had no support, no team, and I had one client, right? He's the one guy working on sidekicks. So anyway, long story short, man, that's when I kind of fell in love with digital marketing. Was in New York. Where after about 9 years there, I'd done the T-Mobile thing. It was great. Went to another agency, worked on Old Spice. Fell kind of into a lucky place where I joined Old Spice before it was Old Spice. So if you remember Old Spice back in the day, it was like your granddad's cologne.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then they had the Old Spice Smell Like a Man campaign, and that's Wyden Kennedy's a beautiful idea that I was working with him. I was at an influencer agency working along Wyden, and we started working on that campaign and didn't know how big it was going to be. All my friends made fun of me for leaving Sidekick to go work on Old Spice, and then a year later, we do the 225 video responses in 2 days. My team managed all the social around that. It was a whirlwind of a campaign. Good, mostly good, some bad things, but overall it was an amazing experience. Again, didn't realize what I was in the middle of. Very different than T-Mobile Sidekick. That had kind of built up. This was like literally overnight. It felt like turning a brand that was old school and not relevant at all to the hottest brand in the internet in 2010, doing things that no one had done before. And I saw the power of digital and social, not only to move impressions, right, which is the BS metric that people cared about at the time, but actually move sales and move cases and get sold out across the country, across APDO and body wash. So did that for about a year. Amazing experience. Got recruited to another agency to run digital. Did that for 5 years, supporting like Diageo, Taco Bell, P&G, NASCAR. I really wanted to expand beyond CPG and tech. And then that's when Chipotle called and said, hey, can you come run digital for us? And unlike Old Spice, I joined Chipotle at its peak when it was the brand, right? It was the hottest brand that, 15-minute waits. Everyone wanted to be a part of the Chipotle kind of movement. And then the food crisis hit like a few months in. And now, exact opposite of Old Spice, where now I'm dealing with this brand that was at its pinnacle, cannot get people in store. Wall Street's killing us. Every other day, it's a new LinkedIn and Facebook headline saying another food crisis issue, coli issue, Boston College basketball team again sick at Chipotle, missing 3 games. It was just all within a month of October of, I believe, 2015. And, again, another long story short, learned a lot. We did a lot of wrong things, some right things. We're just trying to figure it out and make everyone happy. As you guys know, everyone knows, a lot of executive changes happened consequently. And now they're back on track with Brian Nickel, who was actually my former client at Taco Bell, weirdly enough. But I left after about a year and a half. Great experience. But I left before Brian got there because I saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, this thing is going to be a challenge to get back. And my role was heading up digital, and I was trying to create a CRM. I launched a loyalty program with them, trying to move them into a digital frontier of restaurant marketing that no one really was doing, and they just weren't ready for that at that time with that leadership team. And Boxed recruited me in as a CMO of a fast-paced growing startup selling bulk goods delivered to your door within 2 days, based in New York, and did that for a couple of years. Again, I wanted amazing experience. I wanted the startup experience where you're fundraising, you're growing a business. I'm getting closer to the numbers, really understanding the financial elements of running a business versus just doing digital marketing. And I loved it. We had our challenges. Went through a lot of discussions with potential M&A investors, potential strategic investors, financial investors. Learned how to build a team from scratch across all functions of marketing, brand, creative, performance, loyalty, advertising monetization, because we can monetize ads on our platform, and did that for 2.5 years. And then I kind of got to a point where I'm like, not sure what I want to do next. I could always do a CMO route, and there was plenty of opportunities. And, talking to my wife, I was like, gosh, I never saw myself as a CEO, but I've worked for all these CEOs, some great, some not so great, some in between. I have all these learnings. And she's like, listen, she stopped me and she goes, why do you keep looking to go find a CEO to work for? Why don't you just get on track to be your own CEO? Go get a role that allows you that experience, that maybe hopefully become a CEO or president of your own company. And, I was like, I don't want to go to grad school. She knows how bad of a student I was. And, I'm like, I just have no interest in getting $100,000 in debt and, just struggling through grad school. She goes, well, you don't need to do that. Just look for the right role. And she works in HR and recruiting. You used to work at Korn Ferry. So she has great insight. And I said, yeah, maybe. And then over the next 2 months, as I was casually looking, I wasn't in a hurry. I always believe you run to something, not run from something. A couple opportunities presented itself, and one was this one. And, on paper, it was not where most people would think I would go, right? From Chipotle to Box to Clorox, right? Like people assume I was going to go to a startup world or, Diageo or some sexy brand, right? Jordan Brand was my old client. But, sometimes, guys, as you probably know, the sexiest thing isn't the brand name or what it looks like on paper. It's actually the role, the people, the manager, the opportunity to grow, right?
Yeah.
And it took me, I'm 42 now, about to be, took me 20 years to figure that out, right? I was always chasing the hot brand. And sometimes, the hottest thing is, man, this role itself was going to really push me and challenge me. And every role I took was meant to do that. But this one was on a different level where I was going to expand my experience into running a full P&L, operations, supply chain, R&D, finance, HR, yes, marketing, technology, and integrate into Clorox, but also transform the way they think in terms of going to market and retail and first party data, things that, that was not the Clorox model, right? The Clorox model is ship pallets to big retailers and let them sell it, right? There's no need to own the data and own the consumer relationship. Well, things are changing, and I had an opportunity to change this major, very successful company from within in the wellness space. So for all those reasons, it did require a move from New York to DC. But, for me, it was like, and my boss is amazing. I mean, it still is, a year into it. And just like everything he told me he would give me, the autonomy, but the ability to learn from him was exactly that. So way long-winded answer to your question about my career. It's been all over the place, a lot of luck, guys. Like, there's not like, I knew exactly what I was doing when I was making choices. One of my jobs I left 3 months after the recession, and my parents thought I was crazy. But I truly believe that one mentor I told you earlier, take risks, right? Like you live once. Like, if anything, this whole Kobe Bryant thing, a few weeks ago has taught me and my wife is like, treat every moment like it's real. Like, whether it's with your family, your friends, your loved ones, like, treat every moment like you're not going to have it again. So, I try to take that to heart way back then. And that was one of those decisions I made. And this was another one where it's like, you know what, I got to do it. Happiness is everything. It's not about the money all the time. It's not about, the title. It's about being happy and driving to something and learning and growing. So, but yeah, most of the moves I made, weren't maybe necessarily intentional, but they were just like a little bit of gut, a little bit of like, let me push myself and challenge myself. And, luckily having a great partner and some good friends and mentors I could lean on for advice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, now go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like we could just spend the whole hour really just kind of talking through that, because I think that's kind of the key. Someone asked me earlier today, and I spend some time here at a startup accelerator mentoring on, the new generation of like Gen Z founders. Mm-hmm. And they're like, how do you do it all? Like, how do you balance it all? How do you do it all? Like the short answer is you don't. Like, that's why we have teams. That's why we have people. Like, people balance out our inability to deliver on certain things. Like, I'm always trying to be more complete, but you have to have, like, to do bigger things. Like, it takes a whole lot of people and a whole lot of dedication and a lot of vision. And I think that, there's a ton of self-reliance for sure. Yeah. But, and any good leader is going to be able to champion people to their cause, but, you're not out there. Bezos isn't building his own rockets and launching them into space, right? Like,
right. You need people. You need great people. Around you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer. I don't know if you guys read John Maxwell, 5 Levels of Leadership. He's all about servant leadership. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And I think, I don't care what generation we're in, how technology's evolved, like, there will be nothing that replaces people and valuing people. And, it's very different than the Mad Men era, right? Where it was about hierarchy and title. Like, I think we're seeing this huge shift, and, obviously diversity of thought and perspectives, experience, that's obvious where we're going. But this notion that it is about your people, man, like, you gotta really, I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is adapt your style to your people, not the other way around. Yep. Like, you might have 10 people who come from different backgrounds. They don't need to adapt to you. You need to adapt to them and realize that without them, you are nothing. And like, listen, I have an ego. We all have an ego, right? But I try to make sure that's not what drives me. I try to humble myself, even though when I get my, I get a big quarter and I get confident, or someone gives me a nice recognition, I'm like, I keep it in check. But like, really, it's the people around you. If you can live by those people and those standards of like, you focus on them and grow them, by the way, which is like the most rewarding thing too, because when you see someone and hopefully 100%. They don't leave you, but if they leave you and they end up in this most amazing role where they're probably going to manage you soon, like, there's nothing more rewarding than that, right? Because you played a small role in helping them get there. So to me, dude, like, it's not just lip service, man. It's like, it's genuine. Like, I think people are everything. And like, when you're around good people who are doing it for the right reason, with high empathy, curiosity, who aren't trying to sabotage each other or be passive aggressive, it's pretty amazing what you can do, even when everything's stacked against you.
Totally agree. There's so many things to take away from your story. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that you've been involved in a series of like very disparate situations. Like
Sure,
you've been with brands like on the way up, and you've been with brands on the way down. And I would love to hear more advice for some of our merchants on like what to do. When they know they kind of hit that point where it's like, oh, we've got a lot of momentum. Like how do we act and how do we operate as a business when we have that momentum? Or like, oh wow, we just hit a huge crisis. Like, how do you prepare for those like total extremes? And they happen to any business that has any lasting value. Like both situations are going to be true at some point.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to prepare. I'm sure some grad school teacher could probably tell you there is a way to prepare, right? But I just, you guys know where I stand on on that stuff. So to me, it's like case by case. But I would say, when you are, let's say, use a first example, when you hit this momentous like swing, right? Something happens. It's either an idea, a piece of content, something you've done, the product just takes off. I think it's honestly, it's like sports. You guys play sports as kids or now? You guys are sport guys?
I played Little League baseball. I don't think that counts.
That counts. It counts for the purpose of this. Well, yeah, I played basketball and soccer all growing up. And for me, my basketball coach would always tell me, don't be afraid of the moment, right? And I think that's the big one I took away. Like, there's a lot of tactical things you could do. Yeah, you could have processes in place. You got people, blah, blah, blah. No, like, to me, it's like, it's a mental state. Like, because it's so easy. If you get a big win, it can be so easy, just like a big lead in sports, to then, okay, we got the big lead. Let's just like hold on to it. And I just don't think it's 2020, man. Like, everything I've seen around is like, things are fleeting, things are moving, things are dynamic, consumer needs are changing. Like, I think you actually have to lean into it and not be afraid of the moment, not be afraid of risk when you do strike it big. So it's like, okay, you have this big idea, a big, amazing explosion with this new product you offer. Like, jump into it, lean into it, continue to take risks, because that's why you probably had that big win to begin with. You took some risks, right? So for me, it's a mental state of like, let's be open, let's try everything, and let's be very clear that this will not last forever. I mean, that's one thing I learned about Chipotle, right? Like, no matter how good your brand is, and name any brand right now that's blowing up, name Tesla, Sweet Greens, it will not last forever. Now, Microsoft is one of my favorite examples of a brand that was hot, kind of died down, and now look at them. They're blowing up again, right? Their stock is through the roof. So they had to reinvent themselves, but it didn't last forever. But now what they have now is a very different look and feel of Microsoft. I mean, it's still it's one of the few brands on like all these indexes, most popular brand to work for at different demographics. 25 years, it's still on those lists, even though the generations have changed. It's amazing, and they don't actually get enough credit for that outside of Wall Street. But that to me is the one thing, is like, even them though, they had a big dip, a V, and then came back up. So for me, it's like, no matter what that swing is, know that it won't last forever. So take the risk and lean into it. And on the flip side, I'd actually argue it's kind of the same deal, right? So it's like you're dropping off, or you had a big issue, you have a food crisis. Okay, well, there's an inherent value, right? You knew what made you popular to begin with, right? So hopefully that hasn't changed too much. Like in our case, that hasn't changed, right? We had some issues, but doesn't mean the food is not still quality and people love our ingredient story. So how do you get closer to that? Don't get farther away from it, because I think it's so easy to throw forgive the metaphor, the baby out the bathwater, right? When something goes wrong, it's like, oh, the whole thing's wrong. It's like, well, not necessarily, right? And you've seen this right now with the way Chipotle's marketing. It's still about the ingredients. It's still about that story, because that is what got you there. That said, you might need to adapt now. You might need to try different tactics. So I think, not panicking, obvious, right? Don't get desperate. Like they always say, there's this awesome phrase, and I'm going to totally butcher, but it's this notion that like in the middle of a hurricane or a cyclone, the warrior, the leader, the one who really can stand still and plant their feet in the ground while there's hurricanes around them, is the one that everyone will look to, right? Essentially, that's the spirit of it. And it's true, right? Those are the people, individuals, and organizations, when all the shit's hitting the fan, they're the ones who stay calm and true to who they are, but they adapt as needed, and they bring people along, and they don't panic, right? And almost anyone we're talking to, again, given your audience, unless you're solving for AIDS, unless you're solving for cancer, unless you're solving for major things, most of the things we're all dealing with, like I'm selling health and wellness and supplements, which is really important to people. But listen, at the end of the day, it's not the same scale as maybe some other industries. So unless you're in one of those industries, what most of us are doing, I mean, I was pushing burritos, dude, and I was pushing, sneakers and a box. I was pushing Quaker Oats, right? Like, come on, like, this isn't really at the end of the day going to make that major impact on people's lives. So if you can keep that context in the middle of whatever is happening, it does make it easier. Now, keep in mind, I wasn't the CEO of Chipotle dealing with Wall Street and investors. So there's a little bit of a framing there that's important. But I do think if you hold true to who you are and maintain calmness no matter what's happening, I do think that's the first step to kind of managing that.
Yeah, I think from a leadership perspective, making decisions based on emotion is probably like when you're in that high pressure time frame. I guess I can't really generalize it. In my life, having made decisions under duress, they're not always the best informed or the clearest path to what the next step is. If you take a step back and you rely on, the advice of others, you have to have some trust and some faith in yourself. I think those are probably the things that got you to the position you're in the first place. It wasn't the emotional reaction.
That's right.
And that's the thing that brought you to the place of prominence or success or authority that you have in the business you're in now. Those are the things that you should lean on, is the insight and guidance and ability to think clearly, not to react and put people on blast on Twitter.
That's right. Exactly. And trust me, I've done it before too. I've made mistakes. I look back when I shouldn't have done that to that guy, or I shouldn't have done that, that panel. But you're right. And it's, you got to tweak it, right? Obviously, you can't do exactly what you did to get there because now things are changing. But you're right. That core foundation, there's probably something there you can rely on. And the interesting you said about listening to others, there's also a thin line on who you listen to at what moment, right? Because at Chipotle, it was a great example. There were some people that were just so sound and calm through the whole thing, which is like, okay, probably should listen to them more. There's other people that were just a little bit more frantic, a little bit more like in dire needs. And I think that's always a challenge too, is who do you listen to when? And in some of those moments, making sure that you have the right people in the room, but also gravitating towards the people who are maintaining that calmness, forget their title or function, but really about like, how do you ensure you have a balance and you're not making decisions just because you're reacting to everything happening around you, but you're taking a deep breath and saying, okay, there's now, but there's also 6 months from now and a year from now. And that's much easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. But I think that's also a big piece of that too, to your point earlier.
So I want to ask you a question about some of your brands, because you're the head of DTC at Clorox, and it's such a diverse set of brands that you have on your portfolio. Maybe before I ask some questions there, could you kind of just run through which brands that you kind of have in your portfolio, and then we can kind of dive into some of those more general questions about DTC brands?
Yeah, so we have for the D2C area, I have like the retail D2C, which are brands that are retail first. Majority of their revenues coming through retail stores and Amazon. So, Costco, Whole Foods, GNC, and so forth, Kroger. And then you have the pure play D2C brands, which are under me, which probably aren't going to be household names. So those brands are one we just launched when I got here. We created a custom tech stack. My first strategies was to build a custom tech stack, not a Shopify or BigCommerce off the shelf, that can scale and support all the brands on one platform and all filing into one data warehouse. So we launched that. And on top of that stack, we launched it with a brand called Objective Wellness, which is like 2 months and 3 months in its infancy. So we're doing a lot of testing and iterating on that to kind of figure out what it's really going to be. So it's essentially MVP mode right now. So that's one brand. It's targeted at Gen X families, Gen X moms and dads, but more moms probably. And then we have Stop Aging Now, which is a brand I inherited, which is really focused on the boomer audience and mainly focused on just supplements. And then the other four brands that are retail D2C, or five brands, I should say, that are in the wellness and supplements category are Burt's Bees, which most people actually don't know Clorox owns Burt's Bees. They've owned it for several years, which is super cool. Great brand. People don't realize that they aren't a D2C brand. Actually, I talked to a lot of people like, aren't they direct to consumer? I'm like, no, they've been around forever and they're still through retail. They have D2C, but the majority of their sales are in store. It's really funny, but people perceive them as this cool, hip, young brand that was born in e-com, which is so funny to a lot of us.
It could be that direct to consumer just doesn't mean anything anymore. That makes that sort of different.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a great point. So you basically say my title doesn't mean anything.
I didn't mean your title doesn't mean anything.
I'm joking. You're right. Because it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's true. It is all direct to consumer. It's just really where and how are you shopping for it, and then where and how are you getting it, i.e. to your door or to stores. I actually completely agree with you. I was the first one, by the way, at my company always saying like digital marketing is a bullshit title. It's not going to be here. It's just going to be marketing. And I remember people saying, well, but you're VP of digital marketing. I'm like, I know. But like I should, if I'm doing my job well, like I won't have this title in 3 years. Like there is no digital marketing. It's absurd, right? So I would agree with you on D2C. So Burt's Bees is one. And then the other four, which are more on the wellness supplement side specifically, is Renew Life, which is a digestion product. Neocell, which is a very popular collagen product. And if you follow the space, collagen is blowing up right now. Natural Vitality, which is also blowing up. It's a magnesium product that helps you with anxious moments, and has a lot in the sleep category too. It's like a gummy and a powder, really popular. And then the final one is Rainbow Light, which actually my wife took when she was pregnant with both our kids. It's prenatal, but they also have like daily vitamins and so forth. So it's a growing category. Obviously with CBD coming in too, it's going to continue to explode. And I imagine there'll be a lot of new players in the market. But those are the four supplement wellness brands, and then Burt's Bees being the fifth one. There's other Clorox brands right now, but they're not really doing much in direct to consumer at this moment. But there's always brands we look at from an M&A standpoint, or even brands that we might look to bring on to D2C. But that as of today, that's my purview. So those brands.
Future Commerce is brought to you by Vertex. Vertex Cloud is the automation platform for tax calculation and use tax and everything in between for businesses of all sizes. From SMB all the way to enterprise, businesses all over the world trust Vertex for their tax calculation needs, and you should too. Check them out today at vertexcloud.com/futurecommerce. OmniSend is one platform to control all of your marketing channels. From marketing automation, SMS, and email to forms and segmentation, you can bring together different channels under one platform with OmniSend. OmniSend's powerful platform allows you to link together every customer touchpoint with one dashboard. And did I mention they have the most transparent pricing in the entire MarTech industry? Find out why brands like Fred Siegel and Unilever trust OmniSend with their customer relationships. Find out more about OmniSend today at omnisend.com/futurecommerce. Gladly is a radically personal customer service platform. Gladly gives customer service teams the ability to treat their customers like people, from knowing their last purchase, their dress size, or even their child's upcoming birthday, all before ever saying hello. Built for the way that people communicate today, a customer and their history are never parted within Gladly. And all conversations across all channels are all contained under a single conversation thread to give agents, the real heroes here, the tools that they need to deliver exceptional customer service experiences. Gladly works with some of the most innovative brands in the world, helping them to deliver a more powerful and more personal experience for their customers. Some of those customers are JetBlue, Tumi, Joanne, Godiva, and Native Shoes, and maybe even you. Don't wait. Find out today what a radically personal customer service platform is all about. Visit gladly.com/futurecommerce to learn more. And I feel like I have to give the full disclosure moment in that in another role at a digital agency that I work at Something Digital, and Something Digital has serviced Nutranex family of brands and building e-commerce for them in the past. So
nice.
I'm just getting that out there so that nobody calls me out that I didn't mention it, because we like people who call me out on things. But it's such an interesting time for a company that I think you don't think, when you think of big CPG, you're probably thinking of P&G and others,
Johnson Johnson, Pepsi.
right. And those are, what's interesting is that Clorox is a very big CPG company and does have ownership of a lot of household name brands that you may not think of as Clorox. Do you think that your prior roles and, do you think that your entrance into leadership of this division is sort of helping bring about change or a different mode of thinking to connect with a new kind of consumer and to maybe tie that back to Clorox being a household name as a quality, family of brands?
Yeah.
It's not quality. Yeah. I won't qualify it. I'll just leave it out there.
Yeah. And I get the question. So first off, they've done such an amazing job. There's nothing I could do that could maybe make Clorox more credible or more, perceived to be quality. The brand is just 100+ years old, like such a great rich history. The few products they have, because they're only $6 billion. And I say only compared to P&G and J&J is relatively small, but those brands that they do have are number one in their category, or maybe number two, right? So they're very powerful in that respect. So there's nothing I could do to add to that. They've done such a great job. If anything, if you look at I think Forbes posted a list actually of the top 15 companies year after year they do this that produce the most CEOs outside of that company, and the top 10 are obvious. You see Disney, P&G, J&J, but they're all north of 50 billion, and then Clorox, right? And they're I think number 7. So it's really interesting that there's clearly a pedigree and a training you get from Clorox, and then prepares you to go into any role. It's really impressive. So for me, nothing I could add there. But to your point of like a different way of thinking, a different mindset, that is my goal, right? Like, have I done that yet? No, probably not. I mean, I think there's a lot more for us to do and for me to do, and it's going to require a lot more people and a lot smarter people than me to help me do that. So we're not there yet. But what is really cool is that everyone at Clorox sees it. Everyone wants to get there, and they're so progressive. And I think it helps that they're based in Oakland, right? So they're surrounded by technology. They're surrounded. Half of the Clorox folks have come from some kind of tech company, so they get that's where we need to go, and they want to. And that's why they hired me. My boss has been, I hate to keep going back to that, but, a great boss really makes the difference because he creates this path, especially at my level. I need that internal influence, and he creates opportunities for me to make change, have autonomy, not get tripped up in the Clorox ways of doing things, which might take a little bit longer than I'm used to, but allow me to take advantage of the good things, right? So maybe leave out the not so good things and take advantage of the good things to achieve what we need to. So we're not there yet, but I think just the more talks I have and the more integration we have and the more we show results, that's always key, right? Results speak louder than anything against the retail brands, the better off we'll be in working towards that transformation you spoke of. So haven't done it yet, but I think we're on the right path, but it's going to take more time for sure.
Speaking of results, something we've been kind of thinking about lately is sort of the friction between brand storytelling and this brandless idea. And obviously we see the company Brandless just called it quits.
Yeah, so sad. My head of product came from Brandless, actually. So
no kidding.
And her product manager came from Brandless. Yeah, both. She came over in April, and he came over a few months ago. And I spent a lot of time talking with them. It's a real bummer, real sad.
It is a real bummer. It is really sad, and it's interesting because Brandless in itself kind of was a brand, which is kind of funny. But I think it represented an idea that we're facing right now with just a constant barrage of knockoffs, right? Of alternates that are no name brands. We're seeing them pop up in the thousands on Amazon, and just across the board, like we're like traditional brands are facing this pressure from like constant like generics and knockoffs. And so one of the things that that we've seen is like eyeballs win right now. Like if you can get your product to the buy box on Amazon, then you win, right? What do you think? Like, what do you think is actually more important? Like, you've got such a rich history at Clorox of good brand storytelling and brand value. Where do where do these two kind of come up against each other? What's more important right now? Getting in front of the customer or keeping your brand integrity?
That's like real Sophie's choice you're giving me right there, right? I mean, like. Dude,
wow.
I don't know. I mean, if I had this answer, I think I would be very rich and not talking to you guys right now. I would have my own island and I've figured it out. I think both, to be honest. And so here's what I'm grappling with. And, I'll be honest, Clorox too, right? Like, I think, so private brand is real. It's a real trend. Amazon, Costco, everyone's clearly here to stay. I think private brand has started with certain categories, right? The essentials, paper plates, cups, utensils, trash bags. I think that's where you've seen the quickest growth there, right? For obvious reasons, if you think about it. Where you've seen slower growth is more emotionally connected things like, apparel, you've seen a little bit. I think you haven't seen it quite with things you consume from like, a health and wellness standpoint. So I do think there's still a very important layer of brand there. And same with cleaning products. I think people want to know, or baby products like private brand. I don't think it's penetrated quite yet because there's a lot of like, hey, I need to make sure this works. I'm willing to pay a premium.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in my kid's body or put it in them. Or I'm going to put it around my house or the dog pee somewhere. What am I going to use? I'm going to use Clorox. I'm going to use Philip and Jackson's, cleaning brand for half the price. Probably going to go with Clorox, right? So I think there's a correlation there. However, I do think that will start to change itself, right? There are a lot of private brand diapers, and if it's from a trusted private brand like Kirkland, you might be more willing to do it than just a generic one. I don't think you can separate the two. So I do think brand will always be important, especially if you're new. Because to your point, Brandless is still a brand. The question is an Oreo going to matter as much? 80-year-old brand, are people going to put as much stock in Oreo as they will, the Golden Rounds cookies or whatever it's called, right? So I don't know. I think that is where it's maybe the historical brands that have just put such a premium on us, you trust us. Are they going to be able to do everything the way they've done it in every category? I don't think so. In some categories more so than yes. Like I think Clorox can continue to own cleaning and be very effective there and not have to worry so much about private brand. Again, that's my opinion. However, there's other brands where in other categories where I think it is a little more concerning, and I think it is a little bit more a sense of urgency of like, hey, how do we defend against this perception of half the price? It's value play, right? Like it might not be the best, might not last forever, whatever forever is, but I don't need to last forever. It's just paper plates, like for instance, like, I don't really care about that. So, but if you're a new brand, that said, to your brandless point, you can't not have a brand. And yes, Amazon, Amazon Basics and Kirkland, but that's still a brand. It's Amazon,
right,
and it's Costco,
Yes.
right? So like you and me creating a private brand, not going to be that effective. But Amazon, Costco, Whole Foods doing it, that's still a brand. It's just a sub brand underneath it. So I do think brand is still and will always be important. It's just a question of, how easily can a brand new brand usurp one of the old school brands? And I think there's a correlation on category and intent, low intent to high intent, right? And I think low intent is starting to go. Mid to high intent, especially if you're putting it in your body or more so your kid's body or your pet's body, that's much, much more difficult, and brand will matter.
There's interesting conversation I recently had with Brian Kennedy of Ministry of Supply. He was saying to try to move people from rational purchases to emotional purchases, and to have this idea that like some things are just inherently emotional. If you put something in your body, you probably have some emotion around where it comes from. Like you think about it quite a bit, and so if you're a new brand, you have a higher bar to clear to tell a story that that will resonate or move someone into that emotional purchase category to say, okay, I have to, this is a more rational purchase now because I know more about it. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting challenge right now when you have so many players that they said the world didn't need 175 mattress brands, but there seems to be, 175,000 health wellness supplement, herbal homeopathic brands in the world. So I have to believe that a few winners emerge among that. And the pie might be growing that more players can have a seat at the table, right?
Yeah, but I think the question is how long. So I think at any given moment, anyone can have a seat at the table. I don't think they can all have a seat at the table for 2-3 years. That's the thing. So I think if you look at any given moment, the brand you see today, a year from now, there still might be the same amount or more. I bet a lot of them are gone and new ones have come, right? So I can be there for a hot minute on Instagram advertising, but man, if I don't catch fire and I don't have a brand, I don't have something unique, differentiation, where am I getting my money from, right? There's no fun. And look at what SoftBank's doing, right? Now you're starting to see, hey, it's not just about growth, it's about profitability. So yeah, I think everyone can have a seat at the table for like a second, but not indefinite. And I think that's the challenge. And I would also say too, it is interesting if you think about like, I heard someone say this a while ago, like I think it's a CPG thing. There's around you, there's on you and in you, right? And it's always easier to get someone to try around you, right? That's like maybe aroma, something around you. It's, less invasive, less intrusive, lower risk, right? Candles, for instance, right? But then on you, a little bit more, you have lotions, you have conditioners, shampoos, deodorant. That's a little bit more personal, but yeah, you still might be willing to try something maybe quicker than if you put it in you, where you're like going to be very sensitive, especially if you have any kind of allergies or any kind of, challenges with your diet. Like, so if you think about the barrier, around is much easier to crack. On is a little bit easier, but more challenging. And then in you is probably the hardest to crack in terms of introducing a brand new brand with a whole new value proposition, something you don't know and are aware of. So I found that'd be an interesting way of breaking it down too.
That is interesting. Yeah, no, I love that.
There's an interesting thing that you've spoken about recently, or that I found in sort of a pre-show prep about Consumer 3.0, and we've talked about this. I think we've said it in a different way around the expectations of a consumer and how their expectations continue to be heightened by the best-in-class experiences they get, with companies like Amazon and others. I'm curious how you're rising to meet those expectations, or if you believe that those expectations have to become more realistic. As an aside, we had done a market research report recently, and some of the qualitative feedback around that consumer is saying, we used to worry whether a consumer could afford a brand, and I think now brands worry if they can afford the consumer. And I think that's pretty enlightening, right?
Yeah. So I'm passionate about this topic, and whether we call it 3.0 or 4.0, I don't even know what version we're on. I think actually someone where I spoke, they just gave me that one. I'm like, yeah, 3.0 sounds right, but there's probably like 7 versions. We're on 7. I don't know, but yes, let's call it the current evolution. And I think this spans generations, right? Everyone, it's so easy to say it's a Gen Z thing. It's not a Gen Z thing. It's a psychographic thing, which might encompass a lot of Gen Z, but it's not a demographic or age thing, right? I think it's more about just a mindset, and maybe influenced by the market you're in. But so I think there's 2 pieces to this. There's the functionality, right, of what we're talking about. You're talking about how quickly you get the product, how the value, the price, right? That's all functional. Does it work, right? Clearly, those are all to me very functional, which is very important, right? Amazon's nailing functional in almost every aspect of it. But there's also the emotional, and when we talk about brand, it's a good segue actually, because we talk about brand. And old school brand was like, you got a big celebrity, you do a lot of TV, right? Frequency. Now, yeah, maybe that's important, sure, influencers and so forth, blah blah blah. But I'd also argue brand now, and this does skew a little bit younger, I think, but it's influencing to everyone, is about what you stand for as a brand. And I think this is important part of your question. So I don't want to segue away from like that value play we were talking about in delivery. And I think that's where you're getting at, like how quick do I get it and customer experience. But I do think part of that is also what is this brand's role in the world and with my values. And it's not to say you're right or left or whatnot. It's not to have anything to do with religious beliefs. I think it's truly like, are you giving back? Are you giving back in a way that's more than 1% of my purchase? Are you fundamentally and foundationally a company that cares about its employees? Are you foundationally doing something for the greater good in some way? Right? It doesn't have to be buy one, give one, but are you actually doing something bigger than a typical donation? Do you stand for something much more than yourselves, much more than a profit, but knowing that profit's important? And do those align with my values? So even if it's a low consideration product, I think that's more and more important, but even more so as you get up the consideration value chain. So I do think that's a real big shift we're seeing. I mean, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care who's elected president. I think that will continue to change. I don't think it's tied to our current president. I think we're just seeing this huge shift, and it's starting in North America and probably Western Europe, but I think it will continue to happen around the world, maybe at different paces. So that's one thing I would say. But to your original point, the other piece is the value side and what is perceived value, right? So if you're to say that, okay, Amazon is all about overnight and probably same day delivery, right? Next 3 years, easily same day delivery, everything, right? And they're already doing it now in some cases. Does that mean everyone has to be same day delivery? Absolutely not. Like when I was at Box, did you need your 25 pack of mac and cheese in the same day? Probably not. Maybe you did, but I would hope not, right? I don't think you need 25 packs of mac and cheese the same day. I'm exaggerating, but would you like the next 2 or 3 days? Or would you want to make sure your baby's food or diapers are there the next day? I think so. So the question is, what is the right amount of value? Is Amazon setting the tone and setting the benchmark? For sure. But do you have to follow what they're doing? Absolutely not. And the expectation isn't that, but is the expectation that you know when it's coming and you have a good sense of that, and you know, okay, I'm paying a premium for this and I'm not going to pay for shipping. Or if I know I get to $50, I'm not going to pay for shipping. That is changing, right? The idea that like, hey, I've dropped $100 with you and I'm still paying for shipping and I don't know when it's coming. That's not going to fly anymore. But if you tell me it's coming in 3 days, there's link transparency, I can link to it, and I spent a certain amount that feels right, and I'm not paying for shipping, then it's okay. That's not coming the next day. So I do think there's variables there, and I think that's the thing to think about. It's not just about I get to you next day because Amazon's doing it, but they are going to lead the way there in terms of putting pressure on everyone else to get better and faster there. As an example.
So you're saying that consumers aren't like their expectations aren't like I have to have a picture of this on my doorstep in order for me to be happy with my experience when it's delivered.
Right. Right. Especially if you're great CX, right? If you're, what's that company, Zazzle or what? There's a lot of these guys where you can do like photos and you customize photos from your Instagram and you put it onto a canvas, right? And send it. So I use that for my parents for Christmas. I did a bunch of photos of our kids and sent them a canvas thing. And, I got to them in like 3 days and I got a note and then it messed up. And then they sent my parents an email right away saying we messed up. And it was a really good customer experience. And what they did, right, they didn't sell me 100 different things. They sold me one thing. And it was a very good, clean, easy experience. And like, it was very transparent in what I was paying for. And like, to me, it was simple, it's easy. And for the most part, it was seamless. And then when they did mess up, they owned it. They were proactive and got it in front of my parents and myself and say, hey, we fixed it. Here you go. So I think, that to me is a great example of like, okay, it was everything I needed. So why do I need that the next day when they nailed all the other pieces to it? So I can forgive them for being 3 days instead of 1 day because all the other things were really good. So maybe that's not the best example, but I think there's a lot of examples like that where it's like, hey, just nail the things that really matter and I'll forgive you on 3 day versus 1 day.
I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about sort of cultural movement, and the fact that this is disconnected from any political environment that we're in. It's something that's just happening. It's not even necessarily tied to a generation. And so you mentioned you're launching the your new in-house wellness brand, Objective Wellness, and we noticed that it was at least in the press release it said it was aimed at Gen X. You know, talk to me a little bit about releasing products for different generations or psychographics, specifically Objective Wellness. Like, where are we headed in terms of launching new brands? Is it does it matter? Does generation really matter, or are you targeting, is that actually more of a psychographic that you're going after with that brand?
Yeah, no, dude, you're right. It's so funny. I totally contradict myself. I'm such one of those marketing D-bags that contradict himself. So yes, it is totally psychographic. I only said Gen X because it was the easiest way for me to convey that mindset, because it does happen to be very much a large part of the psychographic happens to be Gen X, but and I do think there is something with marketing. I do think Gen X is under marketed too. It is kind of crazy, man. Like, everyone's talking about boomers, right? Boomers are the fastest growing e-commerce segment. Yeah. Go after them, right? Of course, everyone's talking about millennials, right? I don't need to tell you that. Now everyone's talking about Gen Z. I mean, everyone's talking about 13-year-olds who literally have $5 between them as a whole generation to spend. They're like, oh my God, Gen Z. And I get it, dude. That's the future, but they have no money. And guess what? Guess who their parents are? Guess who the ones where both parents are working and they're in powers of position in their companies? They're VPs, they're managing directors, they're running companies, they're traveling, they grew up in technology. It's Gen Xers are their parents. Gen Xers in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s are the people who have the most influence at this point in time on Gen Z, and yet no one's talking about Gen Xers. There's this forgotten generation, and I'm biased. I'm at the end of millennial, beginning of Gen X. But man, we are like this generation that the boomers took forever to retire, right? That's a known fact now. They're starting to come out of the workforce. Now Gen Xers are moving into roles and positions of power, and they're running companies. And, no longer do you have, for instance, the traditional stereotype mom of the COO of the household, right? You always heard that the mom is the CEO of the household. No, this mom is the CEO of a company. Right. And maybe dad's at home, or maybe dad's a freelancer. And that's becoming more and more common. So there's a whole shift of mindset of how they think. They grew up in e-commerce. They literally watch Amazon launch as a bookstore and turn into what it is now. Like, their whole mindset is so different than boomer. They've dealt with a lot of change and a lot of turbulence. And they grew up in the 80s and 90s, which is a very, very unique mindset, in my opinion. So I actually think there's so much opportunity to talk to them. They have a lot of money. They influence arguably the most influential future generation right now in Gen Z, and no one is talking to them. So that was really my perspective in terms of why I thought that was an opportunity. That's a sandwich generation. But to your point, it is definitely a psychographic as well, as I think about who we're going after there, and that extends into millennials as well.
I think that's really, really interesting to me. I love your focus on Gen X, because who gave Gen Z their values? Like, who raised them?
Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy.
There might be more in common between Gen Xers and Gen Z than there is between millennials and Gen Z.
There's actually an article that talks about just that. It said how Gen Zs are so influenced more than millennials are by boomers. They're so influenced by Gen Z or Gen X in terms of their values, what they matter. Because if you think about what Gen X grew up in, they came out of the 70s, right? They came out of a Woodstock kind of generation, Palestine, right? They weren't around for that. They were young for that, but they really grew up in the 70s and 80s. And that was very much about all love, and it was all about coming together, and it was all about welcoming differences. I mean, think about the 80s, man. 80s was like a sexual revolution in a lot of ways. And now we're seeing that sexual revolution happen again 40 years later, right? It kind of whittled down in the 90s and early 2000s. Now you're seeing the Gen Z kids, look at them. They are as open-minded with their sexuality as we've ever seen, probably since the 70s and 80s. So I think there's definitely a correlation in my mind to that. And I think it extends to a lot of different values.
This has been amazing. I feel like you should be a third host of this show.
I don't know. I think you guys set the bar. You guys have an awesome show. I'm a big fan. So
thank you so much. We appreciate that. That'll definitely become a pull quote on our website somewhere.
Cool. Anytime.
And one thing that I think we usually close the show by asking you to predict the future a bit, because we are called Future Commerce. We've sort of changed that narrative a bit to say the future is what you make of it. You should shape your future. Mm-hmm. Is there something in the next, say 3 to 5 years that, retail operators or, operators at retail brands could do to have an effect on the way that consumers are shopping, or the way that they're engaging in the world? Do you think that brands have that power? And if so, like, what could we do to use that power in an effective way?
Yeah, I do. And I think, I hate to get all like, kumbaya frou-frou about it, but I think they generally have to care. Like, I gotta be honest, I don't like to go political. I'm watching a lot of the things happening in the political landscape from all sides. And it saddens me, right? There's this lack of honesty. There's lack of transparency. It's all the same old shit. And it's just, I feel like I want someone to come out there, say what you will about Mark Cuban. I like him because he's so honest. He's just so direct and so genuinely honest. Now you can say Trump's honest too, but it's just so offensive. Like, I can't get my head around it, to be quite honest. But like, Cuban is very honest about what he thinks and what he feels about where we are. And I feel like there's this opportunity for brands to have a similar kind of honesty in terms of what they stand for, what they don't, what they're going to do. Like, I think Everlane and Allbirds have done this really well. Everlane's transparency in supply chain and their COGS and how much profit they're making. My God, how amazing and refreshing is that, right? So you're making 50% margin. They really exposed themselves. It was like, hey, we are making money on this, right? And here's why we have to. I love that. Allbirds calling out Amazon for trying to knock them up. Amazing, dude. Like, that was pretty risky on their part, to be honest, right? Absolutely. Amazon's known to crush you if you take them on. So like, I just think there's a need for brands to go even further with how they care. And honestly, maybe it's just about caring, right? I think we should just care about each other more, right? Not to be all kumbaya, but like, it just feels like it's all about division and like pointing out differences and like digging in. And it's like, man, just like, wow, it's too much sometimes. And I do think brands should and need to play a role. For-profit, non-profit alike should play a role in caring, being transparent, being honest with each other. And if we can start to at least have that conversation, start at that ground level, is that's the expectation, not like, oh my God, you're so amazing, you're transparent, then everything else on top of that becomes just a really wonderful place for us to then make our choices versus having to choose from lesser of evils. So for me, I don't know, like, it extends beyond brands, but I do think brands play a role. Absolutely.
That's a phenomenal place to end it. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Jackson, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Hopefully I didn't swear too much and the beeping out isn't too cumbersome to the flow.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks for listening. If you want to drop us a line and let you know what you are doing in your company, maybe you work in a CPG organization, you're trying to create the next generation of consumer packaged goods and you're focusing on demographics, psychographics, or maybe you have some feedback for Jackson, send it over to us at hello@futurecommerce.fm.
Or maybe I was full of crap. Maybe that was full of crap too.
Well, more likely. I didn't want to say it, but that's usually the email we get, so it's okay.
I would anticipate it, but I'd actually love to hear it. If that was the case, I would love to have dialogue with anyone who disagrees, because I think that'd be really fun, actually.
Yeah,
that's great. I love continuing the dialogue. Thank you so much, Jackson, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.